You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Well, welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Rich Cox.
Yeah, good to be here, and good morning to you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
What I do professionally, I actually am a director of a not-for-profit organization that believes in, multicultural education and advocates for multicultural education and other aspects of education within our communities. And this is a wide range of stuff, and it goes everywhere from STEM programs, all the way up to just your typical, K-12 reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Okay, so what about multicultural education? Because I feel like a lot of what the educational system does, at least in school systems, is the common maybe multicultural day or something where you have like an Independence Day or Black, whatever, African American History Month. It's like, but isn't it all technically all of our history? And it seems like I mean, I've been to a class where they call it Black American History, and I'm sitting there just listening to the syllabuses and stories, which are all based on like white guilt shit. I'm like, when did we decide that like it was okay to teach it this way? Like, honestly, it's real, yeah, but it's supposed to make the other person that's listening, who's maybe not of that color, feel like shit in a way. It's like, when do we define race as something to judge another person on? Why don't we just look at people as people, and we're all, in this country trying to survive together, or on this world trying to survive together?
Yeah, that's true. And sadly enough, we let class structure and education structure, start to define racism. Because when you teach subjects in a multicultural format, you take in all aspects of the history of how certain things are derived. And we've seen that in subjects like mathematics. Mathematics obviously wasn't taught from a straight line. There were other cultures, there were other aspects of it that made the mathematical concepts that we have today, real.
Well, a lot of our basic functions in the education system, such as literature, that all comes from Greece. That all comes from, a whole nother side of the world compared to us over here, where we think a lot of the stuff that was invented in America. Well, half the shit we use in America wasn't even invented here. It all comes from a different culture. We just turned it into the form it is now. I mean, you mostly see it when it comes to music. A lot of people consider like, oh, that's a stereotypical, that's urban music, that's whatever white people music. It's like, no, music is music, and it's meant for whoever it is supposed to listen to it. The thing that comes across with music is the idea that it's supposed to make you feel an emotion. It's supposed to make you get something from it and also be able to understand it. How many times do you listen to a song and it feels like the song was tailored for you? I'm like rap music. I like all types of music and I understand it all. But to classify it as a certain race's only music is really doing the wonderful art or creative piece kind of a disservice.
Yeah, and sadly enough, a lot of things are not incorporated into that, because what you're saying is correct. And when people start to put these definitions and then put it into these different boxes, everything gets divided. And unfortunately, the division in music, I've used music as an example since you brought it up. The division has become a marketable sense, because now when we honor our musicians on an annual basis, we have different award shows for every culture. We have ones that directly towards, country music. We have ones that do directly towards R&B. We have directly ones towards, the Latino crowd. And all of this came about because a lot of these genres felt they were not properly represented onto the main stage, for the Grammy Awards. So, well, we're not getting our fair share out here. So we'll, extract it out and then we'll do our own on the side to recognize those who weren't recognized on the main stage. Well, then the marketers come along and say, well, you're correct. Start your own on something on the side. We'll market that as well. So now everybody has this multi-billion-dollar industry, and as we keep dividing and dividing and dividing it, what are we doing? We're basically just keeping ourselves apart and not letting the transition, take its place.
Yeah, well, you look at music, and it's become more industry than creativity anymore. Only on the concept of they found out in the beginning, like, oh shit, this type of music brings this type of audience. So let's just make music for this audience, and that's where we ended up stereotyping just music in general. That's a black music. That's whatever. That's classification of this and this. It's like, what about the people that enjoy that music that aren't of that color? You're not advocating for them just because maybe someone didn't show up to a concert because they didn't want to feel uncomfortable or something. And I'm like, that's not a problem with the music. That's a problem with that person and the music industry in general. I mean, I've been a minority my whole life, only on the concept of, yeah, I'm white, but I work in an all Latino housekeeping staff. Okay. I've watched the barriers of race get put up, and I've watched it get torn down. It feels like every time I tear down that wall, it's been the past 3 years I've been working there. It feels like I'm becoming part of the family. It feels like the walls go right back up if you don't do something right. But it's the concept of looking at another individual and having a type of empathy, and empathy cannot be race or stigmatized. Music, education, all these things, they're all very, very one-sided. The education system's a little bit flawed in general. They're teaching you to teach a system or craft and create a person that works a 9-to-5 life. And that's not a lot of people nowadays. You're
Oh
seeing
no,
self-entrepreneurship where it's rising, and it's like, it totally changes the game. I mean, there's a kid that can get famous just off playing video games back in the day when people used to be like, you can't play fucking games and make a life off of it. Next thing you know, that person's buying their house. Like, I just kicked you out, son. It's like, how did you do that? Well, I was playing video games,
That's true. Yeah, that is very, very true. And that, really started my visualization of what I call Mondays off. The whole Mondays off concept came around because of through my travels around the world, eating, drinking, laughing with different cultures across the face of the earth. It became a different concept of what we call work to live and live to work. The other cultures looked at lifestyle, and they looked at family, they looked at, their own self-wellness ahead of their work life. And we have more of a relaxed and more of a condensed work schedule because they believe in the time of family. They believe in the time of, self-wellness. And a lot of self-wellness, like we just brought out, brings about the entrepreneurship. Getting a chance to meditate on the side can bring a lot of ideals out there to the world. And so when you take a look around, like you said, here in America, we just kind of like train you for that 9 to 5 and, crank out that 40-hour work week. And, it's how you're supposed to be part of the American system. Whereas other countries look at it and say, well, we look at it in a more reduced schedule. We'll get our work done. But we like to put other things out there, first in terms of family, self-wellness. So a large majority of the countries took Mondays off, or they took what we consider the beginning of the work week. They took that Monday off. Usually a lot of the holidays, I'll give you a perfect example, like Resurrection Sunday, or some people say Easter Sunday. The day after, that Sunday, that Monday, several countries across the world take that day off because they feel that people need to recover from family, from self-wellness for that, that time of being together.
Yeah, well, you can only live with your family and see them. Like, if everybody in your household was stuck, nowhere to go, nobody left the house for 7 days in a week, somebody's reaching for a butter knife. It doesn't matter how much you love your family. You need that relaxation to yourself, but you can't live in complete isolation, obviously. But,
Yeah.
With these jobs now, you're seeing so many people work from home that are crafting out their own lifestyle. I mean, that's healthy too, but it's also bad because then work is always home, and then you start associating it with that, especially if it's bad work, stuff you don't enjoy doing. But we live this life where you have to work Monday through Friday and have your weekends off. Well, I have like my Mondays and Tuesdays off, and then I work weekends as well. So it's like you get to see the whole shift depending on where your job is. But there is a this idea that you have to work 5 days a week, you have to work this whatever types and put in this certain amount of hours, it doesn't make any sense because half of that time you're just sitting there doing nothing. Half of that time is just there's hours where you sometimes might not have work, you might not have something, and they just keep you there like let's say in an office position because that's what the structure is. That's the template. Well, you have to be here for this many hours. It's like, but I got all my fucking work done. Can I go home?
Well, that's true. And what's interesting, I looked at some of the structure of companies like Amazon, Google, even Deloitte is another major corporation, and they reflect exactly what you just said. If you're coming in and you have a project to do, or you're working on a team concept, and you got it knocked out within 5 hours, and you were there from 10 to 3. Well, there really is no reason for you to stay from 3 to 6 or 3 to 5, because that becomes a wasted time. You're not really doing anything. You're really just sitting there.
Yeah.
So,
I work at a hotel, man. We have our busy moments. We have our busy days where I won't get done until right when I'm supposed to go home. But then I have my days like, it's slow. We have 6 people staying there at the hotel because it's wintertime. So like, I'm done by 12 o'clock. I'm like, can I just go fucking home? They're like, Robbie, can you just not sit on your phone and get paid? I'm like, you can only do that for a good hour. And then you want to bang your head up against the wall. Like, yeah, there's rooms I can go in and watch TV. Okay, but you know what I could be doing without being at work and just sitting around and getting paid? I could be producing or doing something I want to be doing, getting groceries, doing a podcast. My mind starts running off, and eventually I'm like, you got to let me go. Like, I'm going stir crazy. I feel like I'm in prison right now.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of people, do feel the same way. And in the workforce is starting to put up with it. They're starting to understand that, we're living a time where not being productive can cause, people to be, like you said, go kind of stir crazy. You feel enveloped. You feel like you're in a box. You feel like you're not being, part of something. And because they just say, hey, I know your work's done by 1:30, but you still got to stay till 5. And oh my goodness, you're on your smartphone for we don't want you to be on your smartphone, getting paid. We just want you to sit there and look at the computer screen
or stare at the floor.
Yeah.
Like, all I'm doing is sitting here. Nothing beneficial is happening. You don't need me anymore, so just let me go home. And then eventually my work was like, well, you're not wrong. And I'm like, yeah, so can I go? And they're like, if you really want to not get paid for doing nothing. And I'm like, yeah, it's honestly, I didn't think it would come to the point where I would, deny free money, I guess, but I want to go home because this is just too much. Like, it's more mentally tolling because it feels like then you're sitting there waiting and you're getting paid, but that minute, that 5 turns into 5 minutes, turns into 10 minutes, turns into an hour, turns into like a day. It goes slower and slower and slower when your brain's like, we could be doing other shit right now. Could be hanging out with your family. Could be doing something that's more beneficial into your life that's actually going to create moments in the time that you need with your loved ones rather than just sitting around getting paid for doing nothing.
Well, like you say, it creates entrepreneurship. I mean, when the mind gets a chance to be creative outside of the box that it's been put into, a lot of great things come out of it. That's like the beginning of interventions.
Do you think work systems should just change their way of thinking? Like, you talked about it saying that they kind of are doing that a little bit, but like, how so? Like, do you think that it would just be easier if someone came up and said, hey, I got my work done. Do you really just want me to sit around here the whole time?
Oh, definitely. That's, I believe. I mean, because, a lot of work that's done these days is usually done through project management and through project collaboration. So once the projects are done, once those goals are met, then, either the workforce gets reassigned or just let the workforce go home and do what they need to do. I mean, I'm a strong believer of that. I mean, if everybody's working on a collaborative project, it could be, here locally or across many different time zones. Once that goal is made, once that project has been established, and there might be a little time left over for a little hot wash, as they say, to go over some of the major points. That's over. Time is done. Everyone has done their shift. You can go home. And I'm a strong believer of that, because even, working with folks in the nonprofit sector, it's still goal orientated. Everybody's working towards a particular goal. But once that event is over, feel free, the rest of the time is yours.
Yeah, especially like I work with some people that just want to sit on the clock and get paid because they obviously have more bills and they have kids and all this type of stuff. I'm like, then let them do that. But that doesn't make sense for me to waste my time if I feel like I've completed what I needed to do and go home. There's nothing else for me here but just to sit around and wait. Like I have to wait on a housekeeper or something. It's like it wouldn't make sense because they could have barely any work that day, but they can ride the clock till 4 or 5. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense, but it's easier for them. It's understandable. I think that, there should be a new kind of work ethic or kind of work regulations where if you get your work done and you feel like you've completed and your work is completed and your manager gives it the okay, you should be able to go home.
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at other countries around the world, we can probably take a look at how Denmark and Norway, and even when I visited the Netherlands, they have a different concept that says, we're working towards projects, working towards goals. We're working in this particular sector, but once our tasks are complete, I'm getting on my bike, I'm getting on my tram, I'm having a Heineken and Amsterdam Central. I mean, I'm out of here. And I look at that society, and they are working pretty well. When I visited Germany, same concept. The Germans are very efficient at a lot of things, and one of the things they're very efficient at is putting a lot of effort and a lot of their time management in a very constructive way. I mean, they have a very, very, very good structure with reduced work week, where they can actually get a lot of things done within a time period that's been set up already. But once that time period is over, and or once those goals have been met, trust me, they are out the door.
Do you think that creates a better environment for someone to have a better headspace going back into work? Because usually after the weekend, for that Monday or Tuesday or whatever, you're like, all right, weekend's over. I'm ready to get back to work. And then after you work that day and then you have to go back the next day and the next couple of days, you're like, fuck, when is the weekend?
Well, that's a true concept, but once again, we are moving towards a society where everything is really goal structured, goal orientated, and wherever the task it has, because in some situations, the weekend does not need to start on time or end on time. And same thing for the work week itself. You look at certain scenarios, whereas, the goal is to work up until maybe that Monday, but then you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are going to be off because the task is not requiring you to be active those days. So, it goes back again. It's like, we don't really need to be sitting around riding on money. We can just go out there and do what we need to do within the time period that's respectful to our general workforce, and just keep things going. A lot of the things you can do, like, say, for example, I look at myself, I don't start my work week on a Monday. For the most part, I started on a Tuesday. And that's usually because sometimes the activities that I do at my work sometimes extends into the weekend. But at least I know that coming up, when the work week comes up, I know I need to start that task Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever the case might be.
Do you find that like maybe if instead of just like some people create schedules at work that kind of come out on like a day and then it seems like you can't plan your week out because it comes out on like the last day of the schedule. It's like, well, then how am I supposed to going to know what my days off are? Do you think it's just easier if people are asked what days they want off and then they're given those rather than just getting a random day throughout the week?
Yeah, I believe that people should be asked what days they want off. And, a lot of that's usually structured around other commitments. If you are if you're working parents, and, both of you may have responsibility of, for example, picking up the children from the daycare or the babysitter. I mean, obviously, there's some sort of, collaboration to be worked out there in terms of hey, boss, I need to be off early on these particular days or not be in at all. So sometimes that plays into the factor. Or it could be, once again, you're working toward a particular goal, particular task, and you know that the markets are closed in this country, or the production or manufacturing going on in this particular part of the world is not active on these days. So therefore, you don't need to be active. You can be out doing something else more beneficial. Sometimes it just takes a little thought, a little research to really make the concept work.
Well, like your work with dealing with the cultural education and, first of all, just the system in general, being and kind of opening up the eyes and perspectives of other people into other cultures and their beliefs and things. This all comes into sort and straight with business as well. It seems like certain businesses only hire certain cultures, and I think it all gets displayed in us through our education system. These stereotypical views when it comes to music, these stereotypical views when it comes to so many things on how we choose to live and act as adults. It all stems from where we come from as kids. When in the system, they're teaching us, who was the most important, who was the ones that were hurt, who was the ones that was this. It's all history, yes, but they don't teach it in a very helpful way. They show you kind of like a one-sided look at things.
Yeah, and it's so funny because one of the things that we are involved with is culinary in our nonprofit. What we do, we support culinary programs that teach our youth from various backgrounds how to cook in other cultures. And, why do we do that? Well, these days, we have a lot of restaurants out there that are fusion. They're not really one culture. They're really a fusion of multiple cultures.
Yeah,
it's almost like
sometimes they're not even that culture either. Like when you say authentic Asian food, you go to a place that is an Asian person cooking your food. I've studied on this one guy who's a chef who was raised in Japan.
I give you a perfect example. I was in yeah, I give you a perfect example. I was over in Paris. I think it was last year when I was in Paris. The hotel I was staying at, right across the street, was a renowned Italian restaurant. And I said, wow, let me just go over here and just, check it out, maybe have a couple of appetizers, a couple of drinks. And I walk in and it was all Asian. And I said to them, is this a restaurant?
Am I in the right place?
Right. And I said to them, I said, I'll say it in English. I basically said, is this a restaurant, an Italian restaurant, or this is a Chinese restaurant? And they said, no, this is Italian. And I said, okay. but through our culinary programs, you do have youth and folks from various backgrounds who would love to learn how to cook in another culture. But at the same time, it also helps the food service industry as well as the hospitality industry. Hotels love to hire chefs who have this multidimensional background, because you never know, when the menu shifts, when you may have a new lifestyle coming into that hotel, and you need to be able to be flexible and, cook and, and serve in other cultures. So we think it's definitely a good melting pot, excuse the pun, for doing that. And it gives everybody a greater exposure, because you get to learn, you get to say, hey, now I see why Asian cooking is like this. Now I see why the South American cuisines are like what they are. Now I see why, people in East Africa, cook with this method. It goes right on time. And so, being in a diverse culture, especially in the culinary, it definitely works well in the workforce. It works well, with the individual as well.
Well, when you start incorporating other foods from other cultures, you expand your taste buds, man. You find an interest you might not have thought you would like. I mean, I work with a Haitian woman, and she brought in goat. I've never had goat in my entire life, and I looked at it, and it looked like kind of like a dark, like chewy, like teriyaki bit.
Like, she bringing the goat head?
No,
bringing the goat.
She just brought in some goat and some rice. It was like it's chopped up. She made it real nice, but no, she just brought in this like little chunks. She didn't tell me there was a fucking bone inside of it. So I grabbed it, put it in my mouth, and chew down, and all I hear is a crunch. I'm like, ow. And like, but it was some of the best food I've ever had, man. Like that's some good stuff. She had brown rice. She cooked it, put this little sauce that she made because she used to be a chef in Haiti. And I was like, this is really, really interesting. And I would have never known about this without this kind of just diving into something. I've tried Haitian mud cookies. I wouldn't recommend eating those because they're not the best for your digestive system, but they're not bad depending on, who cooks them. This woman made her grandma's recipe, which made it taste like snickerdoodles. And I'm giving her crap for it because if anybody doesn't know what a Haitian mud cookie is, it's 90% dirt, 5% butter, and 5% salt. They use it to keep themselves off starvation. So I'm talking to her and she tells me, yeah, we use clean dirt. I'm like, fucking clean dirt. What did you just tell me? And she's like, it just has more essential irons and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, bring it in and I'll try it. It was pretty good, man. I mean, that's better than I could think of, like a Krispy Kreme donut from down here.
Yeah, did she let it bake in the sun, or did she put them in an oven? How did she do them?
She wouldn't give me all the details of what was really like the little spice or whatever they put on top of it, but she was like, she baked them in the oven and then let them sit out for a little while and actually truly dry out. And I was like, they weren't bad. I mean, they were actually pretty moist too, which I was surprised. And I was like, it was just beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't eaten a mud cookie. I don't know how long, but I do know the background of it, and it's kind of glad you brought that up because it gives you an experience of not only of the food but also of the culture and also the history of why the mud cookies were put in place. Because a lot of the impoverished people in Haiti, that's what they had to rely on and to make it work. But no, it's just a great experience overall. I mean, it's like I said, going back to the whole thing being in Paris and going into that Italian restaurant and seeing Chinese folks running the place. It's just like going back to here in New York City, going to the Bronx and going over towards some of the traditional pizzerias, in Arthur Avenue, and looking there, you see some of the traditional guys from like back in the day. There's one guy named, I remember when I was a kid, named Giuseppe. I kept Mr. Giuseppe's last name, but everybody knew about Mr. Giuseppe. And it was when they made pizza. It's not like they did like these days with a measuring cup. They were, you wanted sausages on your pizza. Mr. Giuseppe would put his hand into the sausage pail. Whatever he pulled out, that's what you got on your pizza. That was
you take what he gave you. That's what he did. You take what he gave you. I mean, I'm telling you, if they added more culture into school lunches and actually took the time, like I get, like it's school lunch, okay? I mean, some of the best school lunch, pizza. Let's talk about pizza. That every day, it doesn't matter if you packed a lunch. If it was pizza day at school, you're buying a pizza. That's just happening. But if they looked at narrowing down things and maybe introducing better stuff, like more incorporated foods, like cultural foods, like we had taco day too, but it was like, it's not, I guess that's as much culture as they were getting when it came to the food. But I was like, there's so much more you could be trying. Like I know some people that are from another country that are chefs at local schools where they'll go and ask parents like, hey, do you mind if your kid can try this? Give them a list of ingredients that go into this recipe and they create something for the kids. And the kids have a whole new perspective. Like I never knew that this food could be like this. Next thing you know, they end up, expanding their palate out. It seems like it's easier for people to be able to expand their palate or their creative sense when they're young or when they're super old. But when they're adults, they just get comfortable with the food they're eating.
Yeah, and it is a shame because we really need to expand upon our palates. For myself, growing up, I did my best to try anything and everything, and being in New York City definitely afforded me that luxury of going from neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood and trying just a little bit of everything before actually zeroing in on certain things. Says, oh, okay, I can I can deal with that more often. But no, it's just a great experience, and you get to meet people. You really get to sit down with families. You get to share meals, share stories, share experiences. While you chopping down on some stuff that you did not know actually existed on the face of the earth.
Yeah, I think that you can definitely expand your category. Like we talked about, just better education of cultures. Well, this is the best education of cultures. It doesn't have to do with the text or the history, but more of the concept behind just, expanding your mind out to different things you would have never tried. Trying art, trying different forms of whatever another culture looks at. Like find something, easily, just type it on Google, what is this? What is their main source of art, or what is their main source of whatever, and just be able to expand your category out. I mean, we live in a comfortable world where we're surrounded with people that do the same shit all the time. So you're not going to get into new open things. And with immigration and all this stuff, you get to see those new things come in here, and it kind of influences people in a better way.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how you brought up art, which is one of the things that we are involved with as well. And this taking it, for example, through dance. We've actually supported a lot of dance dance programs, and where we invited artists from all over the world to come and not only show their dance techniques, but how it relates to their culture and their movement as a people. And, sometimes you just look at some of the amazing dances that came out of perhaps Africa or even South America. But, I've found a lot of the dances that came out of, Northern and Western Europe to be, quite interesting.
Yeah, like everything when we go and say what's a traditional dance, like when you go see like a cultural dance, like Native American, the stuff that literally shows passion behind it. Like when you watch that stuff, they're not just creating a little like tap, tap, watch me whip, watch me nay, nay. It's a concept of they're trying to teach you a story as well as bring you into their traditional background.
Yeah, and it really tells the story, it tells the history, and in some cultures, it was a way of sending messages. It was a way of communication.
Firing up that little smoke signal.
But that was one of the ways that we were so amazed and exposing people, large audiences, to say, hey, this the type of dancing that you see in the United States, how diverse it may be. There is a whole nother concept on the other side of the world, where they look at us and say, wow, we have to look at them and say, wow, we need to come together and just, everybody has a great time, and, and be engulfed in the culture, engulfed in the music. Another way we've, really expanded upon our multiculturalism is through art again, but more in the physical art. We're talking about, I'll give you a perfect example, graffiti. Being, here in New York City, growing up in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, being exposed to graffiti on large platforms, was right in front of you. I mean, it was very expansive.
That's one of the best forms of creativity is graffiti. I mean, I've been to Hawaii, man. And when you get off this airport, and I talked about it before in the podcast, but it's one of the most memorable pieces of graffiti when I started looking at it as art, because I mean, in my town, we got graffiti, but ain't nobody here a Picasso. It's everyone's drawing dicks on buildings and stuff. And it's not good to look at. But when you go to somewhere and you look at, like when I got off the airplane in Hawaii, there was the Hawaiian punch guy, that dude with the red hair.
Yeah.
He's on this giant 50-story building painted, like someone gave him a lift to go and paint the whole thing. Like some dude paid to have that on his building. And in one hand, he's holding the world. And in the other hand, he's holding a factory. And there's like a portal that's leading all the smoke from the factory onto the earth. And it was the most impactful art I've ever seen. And you see stuff through pictures. People will be walking under a bridge and they'll be like Stevie Wonder playing notes on one side. And as the notes are floating all the way down the wall under the bridge, it's turning into different things, birds, and just going off. That's amazing art.
Yeah. And, you're right on point with that, because, growing up in New York City, I was only exposed to the platforms that I saw, in the Bronx and Brooklyn and so forth. But traveling through, for example, through Western Europe, seeing the graffiti. I went to the Berlin Wall about 4 or 5 years ago. I visited the Berlin Wall, and just seeing the entire parts of the remaining parts of the wall that are still up, how the graffiti has been placed on these walls, telling the story is almost as if, someone walked up, had a vision of what times were like, and just went out there and just did it. And it's amazing. I mean, it just tells a complete story, complete history, and it tells it on both sides. Some of the graffiti actually was in support of what the culture was back in those days in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and early 50s, all the way through up to the nuanced graffiti of how life is for Germans now in the 80s, 90s, into the new millennium and moving forward. Even the whole coming together, being a part of a divided culture, of being a part of East Germany, West Germany, how that barrier has now been broken down. There's graffiti that tells that story. So I was there in awe, just looking at, that whole experience. Another place was in London. It was a little small area, not too far from, I believe, was it either the London Bridge or the Tower Bridge? But now it's all brand new. They got nice new development. But just walking through, those neighborhoods, those side streets, just getting that experience, saying, wow, this type of artwork exists, you know, on the other side of the pond, as they say. Yeah. And done with that heartfelt, you really feel that someone actually put their heart into this when they wanted to make that expression, on that wall.
It's a part of the reason why a lot of train railroad systems, a lot of the trains that run on them, they keep a lot of the graffiti on the train, on the concept of some of it's nicely well done. Like it shows an expression of that kind of character to that train as well. It's crazy to see, but like I remember so many times stopping at a railroad track and then just seeing this long ass train that feels like it's never going to get across the tracks, go across, and I'm looking and I just see all this like graffiti art, and I'm like, there's some that's tastefully well done, and I can see where like a business or some person would put that on there because it's a form of expression and creativity. I mean, it doesn't always have to be on a canvas. I always look at the Key and Peele episode. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they had a skit where it was these gangs. They were drawing graffiti on the wall, and a bunch of them were doing like just quick little circles and messed up symbols. And then this one dude pulls out a sheet and starts painting the wall with a layer of white paint to get the base coat down. And then like before he even starts spray painting, they're like, "What are you doing, man? Just spray paint the wall." He's like, "I gotta make sure the foundation's right." And like, it was too funny because like, it's true. Like when someone puts more time and character into something that they create, it can honestly impact you a lot more than just something so simple.
Yeah, and I enjoy it. I mean, I really enjoy looking at this, experiencing it, especially during my travels, and bringing back great stories and letting everyone know that there is a life outside of where we live. It's a life that needs to be experienced by all, and it's very helpful because it'll make you look not only at others differently, but it'll make you look at yourself differently, and look at everyone and look into your own experience and say, hey, you know, there's still a lot more for me to do in this world.
Do you feel like with more of like keeping graffiti around or just keeping these type of small educational aspects into different cultures that it's going to create a more positive environment for people to live in, knowing that there's this beautiful thing about something or another culture?
Oh, I believe in. Oh, yes. Please keep graffiti around. you know, I venture through neighborhoods now, and there are spectacular graffiti murals in Harlem, for example, here in New York City. I have several neighborhoods in Brooklyn. I'm just saying places locally where I live. My goodness, if we were to build over, paint over um, these particular events, I mean, my goodness, you're ripping away, the particular culture of that neighborhood. I believe in, those artistic expressions. I mean, I've, gone into certain areas of Brooklyn that are, predominantly of other cultures, and, just seeing their expressions on their walls, what they're trying to, put out there, ripping that away, takes away from that culture. It becomes an expanse conversation because most communities nationwide are going through what they call regentrification. And that's really a term that people can argue about for a decade or or a lifetime. But, to have a community that was once part of another culture and that culture decides to leave, and then the property value of the remaining folks that are there starts to go down, and now you come back to reclaim the property or retake the property or buy the property and kick everybody else out to enact another culture. And if you don't get your way, you probably set up an economic empowerment zone. And, it's a big argument. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you can have regentrification right next door to existing culture. And I've seen it in several communities where you can have these expansive developments that are part of a regentrification process, but you can still have right next door that existing culture that makes that neighborhood what it is.
I think when you especially walk down a neighborhood in a certain area, like a lot is shown, especially by graffiti, but mostly, how people can tell stories. Well, buildings can tell stories as well. It shows a type of character to that city. If everything was so squeaky clean and new, you wouldn't look at it with as much character as you would with a building that has these cracks in the brick, that have these graffitis, or just shaping in a way that looks like they've been worn down by weather or whatever events. Because walking through a city like New York, where riots can take place or riots have taken place, or walking through any city, you get a story from it. And I think when people cover that up and they choose to make the neighborhood better looking, you're not really making it better looking, but you're clouding up a past, you're clouding up a tale that it has to tell.
Yeah, it's something that the folks who are on the community boards, the folks who are on the planning commissions, they need to be multicultural educated, to a certain extent, and not have a single dimensional thinking. And that, also is part of, the problem. One of the things that's kind of interesting, here in New York, and I've been to a few community board meetings on other issues. It was allowing folks who actually lived in other neighborhoods to serve on community boards outside of their district. And I was kind of two-sided on the issue. I really didn't have an opinion either or. I could understand why, the city was allowing that, because it would give an outside opinion on another purpose, which could not be influenced. You have a third party looking at the process saying, okay, now I can see more clearly why this wanted to be happening that way. But at the same time, it took away valuable seats from the existing culture, the existing neighborhood, which could have served, the existing population. So that's still a two-sided issue with me, but I can understand, why they do it because of multiculturalism. Because you have people say, well, I want to do this in this particular community. And, well, this community's been looking like this for the last 25 years. Well, I want to introduce this new concept. You might need a third party to say, well, maybe there's a way we can collaborate. We can all work together to make it all better for both sides.
It's always about bringing another perspective in. I definitely think, having a new eyes to an old situation can help you conquer it a little bit too. And
yeah.
also bring in that extra perspective. And I mean, Rich, it's been awesome having you on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking your Monday off to be able to sit down and have a podcast with me, man, because it's been awesome talking to you.
Hey, I love this. And hey, hopefully we can collaborate sometime in the future.
Right on, man. Well, I want to give you here a minute at the end to kind of promote your content so people can find your work.
Yeah, I mean, you can basically just go to Instagram and just look up Rich Cox, as RICHCOX. And from there, you can basically know a little bit more about me. And then they can always instant messenger me or DM me for more about the not-for-profit organization I work for. And we just want to make the world a better place, and just want to make our collaborative thinking and pluralism everyone's thinking.
Open the minds to all perspectives.
Yes, sir.
I like it. Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank, and stay tuned for our next episode.